Now I feel we have to be extra smart and extra kind. You know, like when your friends' parents would come visit like your elementary school class, and maybe they would bring cupcakes, and maybe this is just an American thing, but it's always special to have visitors. So I'm really
It's
glad that your
cool as
mom is
hell. We
here.
can be ourselves.
Okay, that's even better.
Thanks.
Tyler, I really like Canva.
You like
I
what?
also made Canva video. I love it.
Oh, Canva.
So
Yes.
no wonder they are on 40 billion valuation.
Well, now they just added video. Before they were purely, photo, but the video part, I
made my logo.
It's so brilliant because there's this millions of social media users who didn't grow up with Photoshop and frankly don't need Photoshop. What they want is exactly what Canva's making, which is genius.
The Canva's direct competitor is Adobe, right?
I would argue that's the closest thing, but they're not directly competitive because Adobe is more designed originally for photographers. And
Canva was started for business mainly, and it started to come for those people that were in business that couldn't really wrap themselves around. Guy Kawasaki was the gentleman behind. We saw him speak in University of Oregon, and that was at the time where he was sort of chasing and looking at Canva, and he was one who toted about Canva to the MBA students when we were there visiting University of Oregon. And he was also sharing that most of the people that started to see and use Canva explicitly were those people that were also in areas of business that they couldn't necessarily do it themselves or hire that ad person or the design person, and they needed something better than PowerPoint and better than Microsoft Word. So it started to become like this sort of interloper product that a lot of divisions in the company could use, and students could use it as well to present their papers.
I think Canva is more for amateur and also business who cannot afford an agency. Oh, by the way, Tyler, you are a bit loud.
Okay, thank you.
Want to go down one notch? Yeah.
You're clearly using the updated club deck, Tyler.
Adobe for video has... Adobe for video has Premiere Pro, and they also have After Effects. So they have like super professional programs for video editing, and Canva is more, like Cheryl said, for amateur users, so that like anybody can just do, video there.
Like me.
Mic check. Should be okay now, right?
Yeah, but Canva never started with video. Canva started with print.
Loud, one notch lower, because you're saying that
I'm a little bit loud still.
Yes.
Okay.
What do you guys think about the Sketch platform? Is pretty cool. I know that's like the Sketch app. That's come out not too long ago, I think. And then we've used that in UI design a lot.
Yeah,
but,
Canva was massive. It started in 2013, and it was really a graphic design software that helped people, like I think it was Magda was saying, or someone else, amateurs, to be able to do graphic design and graphic illustration without hiring a design agency, as Cheryl just said. But video is something very new that was been recently added. So it really was there as a graphic illustration tool for those people that were not graphically inclined and were not artists themselves, to be able to put together graphics and design work very easy.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm ready.
I just want to say hi to everybody.
Have you pinned the tweets?
Hey, Mahira.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably go on silence because I'm in the Himalayas in Kashmir. Just recommend everybody get out a little bit into nature. It's fun stuff.
Wait, you're in the Himalayas right now?
Nice.
Yeah, we're cruising around in the mountains for the last 2 days. Just like literally on the roads and like treacherous roads up in the mountains, and like see the cliff and edges, and it's you can see the CO2 problem for sure. These trucks put out so much junk in the air, but it's beautiful though.
Are you in Nepal or India, or where are you?
I'm in India. So we were in Leh. So it's interesting. We flew into the airport. The airport lands at 11,500 feet in the air, right? And so it's all desert mountains, and it's called Leh. And then we kind of just made our way up. Now we're making our way to we're in Kashmir now, and then we're gonna go snowboarding here in a little bit later. Just about 3 hours, we'll hit the area where we're gonna start being on the slopes and just bounce around here in the Himalayas. Yeah.
Hey Mar, I'm going there in January, man. I go there every year, so
Well,
I
PTR
go to Leh
Michael.
every year.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Lay is
totally.
gorgeous, man.
We're ready.
We are ready.
Yes,
Let's
we
do
are,
this.
Tyler.
It's
I'm
Monday.
not too loud now, am I?
No, you're good.
You're
Okay, here we go.
okay.
Okay, so the top story, happy Monday. Hope you all had a great weekend. And the top story today is that the U.S. Infrastructure Bill amends Tax Code Section 6050L or I rather, 6050I to require certain recipients of digital assets worth more than 10,000 US dollars, which digital assets could be, all kinds of things. It's pretty much the entire that it doesn't even need to be coins or money. That could be NFTs. It could be any digital asset. So recipients of digital assets worth more than $10,000 must report the sender details to the IRS. So whoever sent you the assets. The U.S. House of Representatives voted to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill that contains a controversial cryptocurrency tax reporting requirement. Let's dig into this a little bit. The House voted in favor of the bill with at least 218 yeses late Friday night, fulfilling a key priority for the Biden administration amid controversy over whether an accompanying Democrat-led bill would also move forward. The Senate originally passed the bill in August, and after lawmakers shot down any attempts to amend the crypto provision, the bill now goes to U.S. President Joe Biden for his signature. The crypto industry was concerned about a tax reporting requirement within the bill that sought to expand the definition of a broker for IRS purposes. The reporting requirement would see all brokers report transactions under the current tax code. Industry proponents worried that the definition would be too broad, capturing entities like miners and other parties that don't actually facilitate transactions. Another provision included in the bill to amend tax code has also stoked fear in the crypto industry. The law, written nearly 40 years ago to apply to in-person cash transactions over $10,000, essentially requires recipients to verify the sender's personal information and record their social security number, the nature of the transaction, and other information, and report the transactions to the government within 15 days. Unlike other tax code violations of this are a felony. That means you go to jail for a long time. And some lawyers have pointed out that, according to cryptocurrencies, applied to cryptocurrencies and other digital assets like NFTs, the law could be nearly impossible to comply with. Exactly right, because if the person's not from America, they're not going to reveal who they are. If they don't have to, if their country's not forcing them to reveal who they are, then you're not going to know who they are. And if you can't share their personal details with the IRS, then that's a felony. Felonies are for things like murder. So, wow. Pushback against the provision held up the bill's passage in the Senate. The Treasury Department still has to explain how it plans to interpret the bill and publish guidance spelling out how businesses or other entities will have to comply with it. There we go.
Tyler,
Yes.
felonies are for white collar stuff too. Bernie
Sure.
Madoff was a felon, so it's not
Yeah.
just.
I'm just trying to for our non-American audience to emphasize how felonies are the strongest category of crimes, for lack of a better word. So normally when Americans think of felonies, it's things that are incredibly serious. Of course, they could be white collar crimes like drug smuggling, but it's usually things that will land you in jail for a very long time.
Or the mom who sent her daughter to a school outside of her school district. I think she was charged with a felony for doing that. But yeah, normally it's like heinous crimes, and then other times people get caught up by just doing things that they didn't realize were felonies. But yeah.
Yeah, it's not
the
idea that it would be something like receiving an NFT. That's kind of
That would fall on the side of the obscure and kind of,
yes.
yeah.
Isn't this kind of an AMA thing, so to stop money laundering? Isn't that why they're doing this whole like identity verification part?
Yeah,
that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, this gets into the whole identity. Notice, you bring up a really interesting point. Notice that implied in this is that the government really wants to know identities, right? And hold that thought in your, pinboard of ideas, because this is why I keep saying that this inevitable identity verification schemes around the web are going to be coming, because they are revealing their motives here by in moments like this, where they're starting to show, perhaps preemptively, that they have a real interest in knowing who everybody is and what they're doing, and forcing tech to enable that, whether or not. And then while at the same time, the tech companies are trying to do end-to-end encryption and everything, and they don't want to know. And the greatest example of this would be Signal, the messaging app. And Signal is now in a bit of hot water, because now the authorities are insisting that Signal hand over lots of data that they don't collect, that they have no ability to hand over. They never had that data. They intentionally don't collect that data. A Signal wants to be a rather authentic, or seemingly authentic, anonymous way to communicate. Well, governments don't want that. Like, they really, really don't want that. And they're making it clear in recent days just how much they're opposed to that, kind of philosophically. So will be interesting to see how these types of things shake out. Balaji has a Twitter thread that he's sharing about America and crypto, and he found a thread by an influential NFT buyer that he said is a very good thread, which I'm retweeting right now to the Tech News Twitter account. And he says, this is a good thread. The tech version of diversity of tactics means combining both exit and voice. And the thread that he's sharing is from the past 21 hours ago. And the thread starts by saying, it's all about America and crypto. And it says, there's no more natural home for crypto than the United States of America. There's no more natural strategic weapon for the United States of America than crypto. The U.S. has never gone wrong betting on freedom, and things are no different this time. Number 2, it says, first, let's knock out the major alternatives, which are China, which is a non-convertible currency, Russia would like to be China, EU, blissfully unaware that technology matters, and India, where Balaji's fighting hard but tough battle. Number 3, let's knock out everybody else, which is Switzerland, Singapore, Dubai, UK, Nigeria, Brazil. Number 4, the US is, on the other hand, very strong, has the largest economy, strongest military, largest tech industry, largest financial industry, largest media industry, deepest capital markets, etc. Number 5, the US has something else too. It has a fundamental belief in freedom from the state and a healthy distrust of the infallibility of the state. And number 6, has the US deviated from these ideals? He says yes many times. It's the worst state in terms of freedom, except for all the others. Take 2 examples. The First and Second Amendment, there's nothing like this in any other major power. The First Amendment is unique. The system of governments is also quite decentralized. The U.S. is a federation, for example, and it has the whole state system. And then he says, in other words, the U.S. has all the ingredients to lead the Web 3.0 revolution because of financial and technological muscle, world-class creative industries, and a belief that its people should be micromanaged, or should not be micromanaged by a centralized set of governmental employees in the capital. He says, so what's going wrong? I mean, the U.S. is the center of the global crypto, but it is a grind. The relationship between crypto and Washington, D.C. is all tension. The position is all defensive. What are all the things that can go wrong, and how can we control them is the, kind of perspective of the government. And then he says, I think that the first issue is generally unexamined growth and KYC, AML, KYC. Anyway, it is a very good point that he's making here, which is based on and it's a very long thread. It has 32, and I only read the first half of the tweets in the tweet thread. I just shared it on the Tech News Twitter account. And he makes a philosophically great point about how the U.S. is ideally positioned to lead the charge on crypto, although this is clearly a pro-crypto perspective from somebody who's heavily, invested in that side of things. And he is clearly an intelligent individual who wrote this post. It's very beautifully composed and very clear in thought. However, as an intelligent person, he must know, although he doesn't seem to even acknowledge it in the part that I read, that, America is influenced by, big industries like the banking industry, who are going to do their best to minimize any existential threats that they perceive from crypto land. So there's always that. I imagine Ken might have a thought there.
Not particularly. I'm more than you've already enunciated. No, thank you.
So speaking on that topic, the next biggest story, well, actually, there's a sub-article to the first article, which is from CNBC, that the House passes a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill with a controversial crypto tax provision. We read that. And $65 billion in broadband funding. Biden could sign the bill within days. And then the next one is from the New York Times about the NFT.NYC conference, now in its third year, was a coming out party for the NFT community, attracting a record 5,000 attendees from artists to corporate suits. And indeed, it seems like people were very impressed with the event. So kudos to the organizers, who I honestly have no idea who the organizers are. Yeah, they seem to have done a fine job of capturing the momentum around NFTs as they are at the moment. And let's hope that that momentum continues for years to come, because what a great brand, NFT.NYC. Of course, the problem is they would need to secure all of the .LA, all the other domain endings to move that event anywhere else in the world, I guess. But I guess you could have .co.uk, NFT.co.uk. But yeah, that's a very smart event while the momentum continues. So the next article is from the Financial Times. It's an interview with Biz Stone, who, if you don't know that and recognize that name, Biz Stone was one of the co-founders of Twitter. One of the three. Evan Williams and Jack Dorsey were the other two. And he's been lying relatively low ever since Twitter. He did try to come out with his own little startup called Jelly, which was a little mobile app, which was a very clever attempt to make a new type of search engine on a smartphone app, which is visual-based search, kind of like Google Lens, but crowdsourced. So, for example, you want to know something about something you're looking at. So you see a dog, and then you say, hey, does anyone know where I can find a dog like this? And then that gets sent out to the world, and then the world says, oh, that looks like a Labradoodle. It's a mix of a Labradoodle and a poodle, and here's all the places, the best breeders, yada, yada, yada. Hold on one second. I'll be right back.
Unfortunately, I can't pin the article from Financial Times.
But Jelly didn't seem to stick, no pun intended. And I will share a little interesting historical context on Jelly that nobody else knows. So when Jason and I were doing Mahalo, we built a question and answer website. And actually, when Twitter was starting, my good buddy Jason, who's the person who invited me into Clubhouse, which you can see in his bio, he was the first kind of popular person on Twitter. He was the first to get to 60,000 followers, for example. And he has the @Jason Twitter account and the @Jason Instagram account. But because he had 60,000 followers at a time when everyone else had 200 or 300, he was able to use Twitter as a search engine. So he would take photos and ask people questions, and they would answer questions. And it was like an alternative to Google. It was like a new futuristic search engine. So I thought that was amazing because I was watching him do it every day. And I thought, wow, this could really be the future. And it got me very excited about Twitter if Twitter could figure out a way to enable everyone to have access to that functionality. Because if you only have 100 followers, your search engine kind of sucks. Well, somebody with 60,000 followers, they've got a really nice alternative to a search engine. So we built something called Mahalo Answers, which is a question and answers web page, kind of like Quora. And we made it possible to send a question into our platform from Twitter. So you send out a tweet, it goes into Mahalo Answers. There you've got way more people, thousands of people answering all the questions. Even though you only have 100 Twitter followers, your question gets sent into Mahalo Answers. If you simply include at answers as part of your tweet, and then we would see it and we would suck it in, just like we use here in Tech News Around the World, where if you include at TNATW in your tweet, we see them and we include them in this show. And Biz actually was the one who gave us the @Answers Twitter account to enable this. So if you had a question, you would type out your question and you would include @Answers as part of your tweet. We would pull it into our platform. Our community of thousands of people would answer your question. And now you had thousands of people as a research team answering questions. So you now have a little bit of a human-powered search engine. And Biz even told me personally, when I went up, I gave him a cake that said, "Thank you for being the answers to our prayers," with the @Answers Twitter account, for giving us the @Answers Twitter account. And he said that this is genius. You know, the idea that you could use Twitter as a search engine, and that he loved the idea that anyone would be able to reach a much bigger audience, even if they have a relatively small Twitter following. So when he launched Jelly, I was like, oh, I know what you're doing. You're trying to make, because when we were doing that was 2007. Smartphones didn't really exist yet. So he did it in around 2010, 11, 12, once iPhones and apps and smartphone apps were much more popular. And I hoped it would work. You know, that I loved the concept, obviously. And he clearly did too. It just didn't quite work out. Anywho, but that's interesting. Yes.
Hey, just building on not from the article, but what you just told us about Biz and Jelly. Just that Google Glass was a bit early in its, augmented reality, external-facing cameras concept 9 years ago. Do you think as we go into the metaverse, do you not think that visual search is exactly what the metaverse is going to need? Yeah.
Amen, brother. Like the idea of search in the metaverse is a totally wide open field at the moment. Like, it's not yet known what will be the optimum way that people will want to search for stuff. I imagine it will be more voice-based and more similar to how we use Google Assistant, but of course there will be a visual component, but the visual almost certainly won't be text.
No, we're doing lots of research in this area, and we actually think this is where AI is going to come to the power. So computer vision, awareness, tracking, eye movement, etc. And there's not really going to be much voice or text at all. We believe in our research. It's basically going to be you're walking down the street, your eyes pick up a tree, and the tree can then be identified through a bit of AI, a bit of computer vision search, and effectively report back to you, oh, that's the name of the tree, or that's when it's in season, or the information you need on that search.
Well, even what I love is you're walking down a street and then you say, "Show me this street," 6 months ago, and then your view in front of you changes magically to show you that street 6 months ago. So if you're in a city with a different climate, you can see what that city looks like in the different seasons. Show me this street in the summer or in the fall or in the winter or in the spring, and how you can change your own reality to reflect the nature of your query is that itself is kind of a mind-blowing idea, I think.
No, love it. And we're looking at stuff. One of the issues we actually have, would you believe, is data storage, because of the amount of information over time that this kind of information will need, and where edge computing kicks in on this, right? So your AR glasses are tethered to your phone is connected to a cloud service, and it's about, can we get that throughput of information from the cloud where the data is stored of that city 6 months ago straight through to your AR glass without any delay or latency occurred.
To that point, Aaron, the meaning of the word search changes, because when you're searching, you are taking a starting point yourself, and you're going to a repository and you're saying, find me stuff on this. But what you're saying there is that actually it becomes predictive, where you want the info, where you look at a tree and it's not search for information about that tree, it's show me. The expectation will be that the information is there instantly on the glasses. So even the word searching, the process of it is completely different. It becomes inversed.
Oh, absolutely, Carl. And we're loving it. We're working with a Cambridge spin-out around vector mapping data science. And what we're trying to say to them is, we don't want to have a human starting point. We don't want to have a text box for search. We want the intelligence layer to be there. And basically, we're looking at identity of an object, or feedback from the retina. Yeah.
You guys don't think that it will also be something like, walking along the street and then like your eyes land on something, but you have to kind of like tap it with your hand, or, like make some kind of a gesture to signal to the AI that you actually do care about it? Because otherwise, it would be an overload of information. Like if we would get information about everything that we look at, that would be quite tiring, right? So like we only want information about the things that we want information about. Our brain is also made in a way to filter out stuff that we see. So wouldn't that be a part of it too?
In a sense, yes, and that might be the stepping stone. Some of the research I do is kind of 5 to 7 years out, and what we're looking at is actually brain-computer interface. So we're looking at the likes of EEG that monitors the electromagnetic wave patterns that are occurring. So we're using that feedback that's already inherent within the human.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. We're probably going to need those stepping stones, and it might be that voice is the stepping stone to say, yes, show me, whatever. But truly, the metaverse, when we're looking 5, 7, 10 years, when we're all existing in this mixed reality world, that's when we'll have to have this seamless interaction with search. Yeah.
You can become predictive, right? To try and, search engines kind of already do this, for instance. If you're on your way rushing to a meeting and you're hurrying down a road, it probably doesn't need to load the data about the restaurants around you or the trees around you, because in that instance there, the AI knows enough about your routine, knows enough about where you're going, how fast the fact you're in a hurry. It probably doesn't need to load all of that stuff. I think the point here is that there's no, like Aaron was saying, there's no human, the cognizant point where the human says, get me this data, no longer needs to happen anymore. The data's already being prefetched intelligently eventually, and then what you're actually doing is you're saying, show me what you already have.
So this is one last point, and then I'll stop talking. This is one of the issues we're contemplating, which is data. Right now, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to share my data, I don't want to give my data. What we're seeing is the experiential or spatial computing component of the metaverse requires a ton of data to exist and to be used at its full potential. And so we're wondering if actually is the metaverse the tipping point for people to be open and transparent about what you were just saying there, Carl, about calendar information within the calendar, where I'm going. because you're getting back that experience. And just like we did, I guess, with mobile phones, when we went from Web 1 to Web 2, we get a lot more information from our mobile phones, to our mobile phones. And so, your identity is in your mobile phone, your payment facilities are in your mobile phone. Will Metaverse, will Web 3 be the opportunity that people, they actually give more data rather than less data and more refined data for their experience?
Okay, moving on. So that's an interview with Biz Stone about what's called Future Positive, which is the investment firm he started in 2019 to focus on investments that are future positive. And his Twitter co-founder, Evan Williams, has a similar tech investment fund called Obvious Ventures, which does the same thing, which is very focused on what they call world positive. And kudos to both of them. Evan's Obvious predates Future Positive, and they call it hashtag world positive. And but now it's becoming more common that successful unicorn founders reinvest in future startups, and hopefully they focus on startups that have a world positive or future positive angle, because that's a lot of what's needed. And so applause to both Evan and Biz for doing that, and Jack does in his own ways as well. The next one is a company called H2o Ai, which provides an open source machine learning platform to build smart applications, raises $100 million at a $1.6 billion valuation. Startups develop open source framework as well as proprietary apps that make it easier for any kind of experience to be built through machine learning. And the next one is from The Hollywood Reporter, that Netflix faces more active libel suits than any major news outlet, partly due to its non-fiction content, often unsuccessfully arguing that it is just a distributor. Although it is. It's also a studio. It does get a little dicey. It says, why suits against Netflix could shake streaming. Oh, someone's got a hot mic. Who we got there?
It was me. Sorry, Tyler.
No problem. The mega streamer Netflix is facing more defamation complaints than any other major news outlet, stemming from projects like Making a Murderer and When They See Us. But is it a distributor, publisher, or something else entirely? These days it's Operation Varsity Blues, Parents and the Central Park Five prosecutor. Then there's the Jeffrey Epstein buddy, as well as the Panama Papers law firm. And then, let's not forget, a former Soviet chess grandmaster, too. When it comes to legal enemies, Netflix has made more than a few. In fact, if a review of court records shows Netflix is facing more active libel suits than any big news organization. Think it's CNN, the New York Times, Fox News, or others, or some other media outlet that has the most to lose from changing defamation standards in favor of plaintiffs? Well, perhaps, but don't discount how libel jurisprudence might factor in the future of entertainment. Why is Netflix facing so many defamation lawsuits? It's at least partially because of the non-fiction content that is booming on Netflix. Following the huge success of 2015's Making a Murder, Netflix has been riding the true crime bandwagon with such miniseries as When They See Us. It's also not afraid to take a modern spin on real-life subjects. Plus, if you're going to feature Alan Dershowitz in a docuseries called Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich, you should probably expect a call from a former Harvard law professor who hangs out with Donald Trump. That's a very funny point. Indeed, you can't have Alan Dershowitz in an unflattering way and not have him approach you. Still, any newspaper worth its ink covers all those same stories with a fraction of the legal bill, and it doesn't quite explain why a Georgian chess champion from the 1960s is suing over a passing remark in a fictional series, The Queen's Gambit. It's important to realize just how historically bizarre it is that Netflix is defending these suits. Think about it this way. Movie theaters never get sued over motion pictures that are exhibited on their screens. Great point, by the way. Should AMC or Regal really be responsible for a potentially defamatory documentary? Yet, Netflix is winding up in court with alarming frequency for content that raises an interesting issue with respect to libel laws. Here's a quote. Let's say there's something in a book or newspaper that is actionable, says Eugene Volokh, who teaches First Amendment law at UCLA. Can a plaintiff sue the bookstore or the newsstand? The answer historically is yes, but yes, you could sue, but they would have a special defense. They are distributors rather than publishers. That reflects the reality that the bookstore owner can't be expected to read everything. Yeah, this gets very interesting because Netflix plays right in the middle of being both a distributor and a bit of a producer. Like, they are financing a lot of the content. So they should be seeing the content at least the content that they're financing. So he adds that the legal context arguably could change if, for example, Barnes & Noble received a notice about a defamatory book and continued to distribute it. And this was the rule before the First Amendment libel revolution. He says, if anything, the rule has been strengthened since. Overall, it's going to be hard to stick mere distributors with legal responsibility without showing firm awareness of falsity.
Tyler, really, it doesn't matter, quite frankly, in my view, how Netflix gets classified here. Because if you want to think about the world before Netflix was big and say producer, okay, as a producer, they're like Warner Brothers or what the historically what MGM was in the 50s. If they're a distributor, they're like a major cable company. And if you think about any of those types of entities, I mean, when have they ever really been hit with like a libel suit or something that actually took? It's very rare. I mean, Netflix is getting hit, with a lot of lawsuits because the whale who surfaces gets harpooned, so to speak, and they're very big. And so just because they're very big, they've got a lot of tentacles, and they're going to attract things because just of the sheer scope. But if you think about it, they're not doing anything differently than movie studios have done in the past, or what television stations that were distributors like CBS or cable companies like Comcast have done. And it's very rare that there's something that sticks. So I mean I'm not saying that can't happen, but it's rare.
I wonder if it's also, a subconscious kind of fear that the plaintiffs have, just given the intimate nature with which we watch Netflix. I mean, they're in our bedrooms, it's in our homes, and it's highly accessible, right? So I think that the power that Netflix as an entity has is that much stronger than any of the studios ever was, because it's completely integrated into our lives in ways that other media distributors have not been able to achieve.
No, but Lakeisha, think about years ago, just the major network, television networks in the United States, a CBS and an NBC came right into your house, and other than pure news programming, if they had content that they created, think of the ABC movie of the week or something from 40 years ago.
Not without my daughter. I remember seeing that with Sally Fields. but
Okay.
yeah, you're right. But in the same way, though, Ken, like, if you missed it, if you didn't catch that Saturday night special, it was one and done, but with Netflix, my mom's first cousin could have heard of something and posted it on Facebook, and now the entire family of 51st cousins is, trying to find it. So I hear you, but I just think that the degree to which Netflix is able to infiltrate, our lives is much, much different than any of the
You
studios
might be
ever did.
correct, but the defamation laws don't change because of that.
That's true.
I mean,
That's
yeah,
absolutely true.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so next up is the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security say a drone, a consumer drone, DJI Mavic 2, like the most popular drone on the planet, actually, dangling copper wires, tried to disrupt a Philadelphia or Pennsylvania power substation in July 2020. The first drone attack targeting U.S. energy infrastructure. DJI Mavic 2 drone approached a Pennsylvania power station. 2 4-foot nylon ropes dangling from its rotors. A thick copper wire connected to the ends of with electrical tape. The device had been stripped of any identifiable markings as well as its onboard camera and memory card in an apparent effort by its owner to avoid detection. Its likely goal, according to a joint security bulletin released by the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and the National Counterterrorism Center, was to disrupt operations by creating a short circuit. The drone crashed on the roof of an adjacent building before it reached its ostensible target, damaging a rotor in the process. Its operator still hadn't been found, according to the bulletin. The incident, which was first reported by ABC, constitutes the first known instance of a modified unmanned aircraft system being used to specifically target U.S. energy infrastructure. It seems unlikely to be the last, however. In response to a request for comment, the DHS wrote that the agency regularly shares information with federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial officials to ensure the safety and security of all communities across the country. When it comes to the potential for consumer drones to wreak havoc, experts have sounded the alarm for at least 6 years. I know we've been sounding the alarm here for the past 6 months, saying that their broad availability and capabilities provide opportunity for bad actors. In 2018, an explosive-laden drone carried out an apparent assassination attempt on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. ISIS and other terrorist groups have used consumer-grade quadcopters for surveillance and offensive operations, but the Pennsylvania incident represents an alarming escalation in drone uses in the U.S. The U.S. has had incidences before. A drone landed on the White House lawn in 2015, and a recent surge in drone sightings near airports and other critical sites has sent the FAA scrambling. Until now, those intrusions could be written off as accidents, but no longer. With this power station, here's a quote. "I'm surprised it's taken so long," says Colin Clark, Director of Policy and Research at the Sofin Group, an intelligence and security consultancy. If you have a modicum of knowledge of how drones work and you can access some crude explosive or just ram it into things, you can cause a lot of damage. The operator of the Pennsylvania drone appears to have attempted a less brute force approach, but efforts to hide the operator's identity may have contributed to their failure to connect with the intended target by removing the camera. The joint bulletin says they have to rely on line-of-sight navigation rather than being able to take a drone's eye view. While this effort failed, the report's analysts are clear that it's unlikely to be an aberration. If anything, they expect to see drone activity increase over the energy sector and other critical infrastructure facilities as use of these systems in the United States continues to expand.
I mean, there was an assassination attempt on a prime minister of a sovereign state recently.
Yep. Oh, I mean, ask the Indians, ask people in India what's going on. Holy shit. It's like more than anywhere, India's been faced with this as the Vinay, I imagine, is it the position of India that the drones that are exploding in the Indian Air Force bases up in the Jammu and Kashmir region are from the kind of
Our friendly neighborhood.
Your friendly neighbors to the west.
Yes. Our friendly neighbors to the west, they're coming in from Pakistan. In fact, they're not just, they're also being used for airdrops now. There was an article, they saw a drone dropping something. They went and found it was a cache of arms. So they're sending across weapons as well for the militants in Kashmir. So, but it's interesting on that. On one side we have that, but India's got also one of the most liberal drone policies right now, with drones being allowed to be used in cities for various transportation stuff. There's drone corridors created, so there's kind of a interesting mix that's happening there.
Okay, so the next one is from Wired. It says, a look at the fight between city officials and parents over Stockholm's glitchy app for its schools, as annoyed parents built their own open source version. And this is the story of our friend Christian, who joins us in here somewhat regularly. He's a personal friend of mine, so I just pinged him on Facebook Messenger, and let's see, shows that he's active now. So hopefully he sees my invitation to jump in and give us a personal update. But he's basically spelled it all out for us in real time as this was happening several months ago, that he was in this big battle with the city of Stockholm, which he knows I work very intimately with, although he was battling the education part of the city, which I don't engage with. I work with the business development team here in Stockholm, and who try and outbid Copenhagen and Oslo and Helsinki to attract Amazon and Facebook and Apple to build all of their data centers, which we have done. We've won all of those ones I just named. We did lose Apple to Denmark. You can't win them all, but anyway. So it's we heard it straight from the horse's mouth, Jesus, 4 months ago when this was going on, how the city was suing him, not suing him, but trying to make it illegal what he's doing and shutting him down and really resisting everything he's doing. And now the article's coming out 4 months later in Wired, and it's become a very popular article, actually, which is unfortunate because it paints Stockholm in a very unflattering light, especially around their education. However, I mean, it's one of those bad news is good news, because essentially if you read this article, you realize Stockholm is in this, battle with an app developer over the fact that all the students and parents and teachers have a shared mobile app where they share everything all the time. And then as an American, you realize, holy shit, we don't have that. We don't have anything like that. And what a great problem to have, that your city is so functional that the students and teachers and parents are coordinating through a mobile app. Shouldn't every city be so fortunate to have that type of luxury problem? But at the end of the day, the issue is about data and data privacy and the GDPR, which makes it very punishable and very serious to share personal information, through digital means. And Christian knows that, and he's not even really violating anything. It's that the school's worried that they might find themselves on the receiving end of, some kind of GDPR issue, and they don't want to risk that. Although I would love him to pop in, and maybe he can't pop in today, but no doubt he will tomorrow or the next day, now that I'm in Stockholm, and I'll probably see him later today, in fact. So we'll get an update on this issue.
I can comment a little bit because I use two of these apps every day. And I think there's a difference between private and public schools here in Stockholm.
Yeah.
The private ones are more apt to adopt this, basically. And I think it works pretty well. You can say whether you want your child to, be his or her information to be published onto a private blog within the school, or just within your child's portfolio, as it's called. And on the public side, I think they're more reluctant to adopt this.
There's another interesting issue that's kind of embedded in this article, which is governments digitizing themselves. This is the kind of the city public school, administrators wanted to digitize the schools in a particular way. Well, governments are digitizing themselves in all kinds of ways at the moment, right? From the water systems, food systems, energy systems, all of it. The tax systems becoming digital. The Department of Motor Vehicles, all of it, and they are terrible at this. Governments are really people who work in governments are typically tragically bad at dealing with technologies. And so when they the process that they have, and this is one of Christian's other major points that he brings up in this article, which is they shouldn't be doing their old process of paying way too much to these really big legacy, big four, firms, the kind of Boston Consulting Group's type big entities, and Accenture, for example, who many people on this stage worked at Accenture, actually. And there's nothing wrong with Accenture, honestly, but he being an app developer team who build a lot of the biggest apps in Scandinavia for a lot of big companies, why weren't they would have been a much better choice to build this app, is kind of his point. Why did you spend $150 million with, one of these massive 300,000 employee consultancy firms when you could have hired us, a team of 100, and we could have done it for a 10th of the price, if not a 20th of the price. They could have easily done this in the $5 million range. So you just wasted $150 million of taxpayers' money. That to him is one of the biggest issues as well, which how can governments and developer teams who make apps, popular apps, good apps, find ways to connect and move things faster and better. Anyway, that's a whole other interesting thought that we could dive into, but I guess we're going to move along because we're halfway through. We got a hard stop in about an hour and 10 minutes. So the next article is from the Wall Street Journal. It says how a scarcity of secondhand chip manufacturing machines, which use older fabrication techniques, has exacerbated the global chip shortage. The world is hungry for semiconductors, and not all of them need to be made with cutting-edge technology. The race is on to find older machines that can still crank out chips. Absolutely. Because there's different qualities of chips. You have super crazy cutting-edge 3 nanometer chips, that are only in your most expensive, devices, like your iPhone, for example. And then you've got, these incredibly old school chips that most of your cars run on, honestly. These are not super powerful or super intelligent, complex chips, honestly. I mean, you even have, little chips now in your light bulbs, for example. When you have smart light bulbs, those are not complex chips at all. Those are incredibly simple. Nonetheless, the whole industry is kind of, impacted by all of this, and how to make better use of, we need to start getting very resource creative around our resources for these chips on all fronts of all levels. The next one is, it says a recently unredacted antitrust complaint alleges that Google gives AMP a nice comparative boost by throttling load times of non-AMP ads via 1-second delays. That would be interesting if true. The Chrome Developer Summit concluded earlier this week. Announcements and discussions on hot topics impacted the greater web community at the event, including Google's Privacy Sandbox initiative, improvements to core web vitals and performance tools, and new APIs for progressive web apps, PWAs, which those are important, because what this is and it's not a surprise that Google's leading it as opposed to Apple. Apple's pretty shady on this front, because progressive web apps mean that more and more of what you used to use smart apps for, like smartphone apps, you used to go to an app store and download an app. Well, the browser is getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and more and more and more capable, and more of what used to be needed as a standalone app can be done in a browser.
Which is a heck of a lot easier, by the way. It's so much easier to develop on that browser
and
make bunch of apps.
The developers who build these apps would prefer to build them in a browser. Why? Because then you don't have to download anything. They can just be like, oh, you want to use our service? Go to our website. There it is. Boom, you're done. Nothing to download. You already downloaded the browser. Our app runs in the browser. Browsers can run apps.
And any device can run it, and you're not controlled by the app developer either at that point.
Right.
They don't control you.
It works on your laptop. It works on your phone. It doesn't matter what kind of phone you have. As long as it has the latest Chrome browser, you're good to go. And so now you see, and then it's super easy to update, because you as the developer say, oh, we want to make some change. We want to change the logo. We want to change this, change that, whatever. Great. Edit, click, 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 click. Boom, done. It's live. Instead of resubmitting your new updated app to the Apple App Store and waiting for the Apple App Store, several days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months to approve your update of your app. And
also they come in and say, well, we don't like the user flow, or we don't like the flow, and they don't understand sometimes and they can hold stuff up because they don't like the way you did it. With that happens a lot too, by the way.
But here's where the really shady, greedy nature of Apple comes into play. Google is pushing this forward with these progressive web apps so that you can run apps in the browser. Apple with Safari is notably lagging, because Apple doesn't want you to build your app in Safari. They want you to make an actual app, because then they get their 30% tax of all of the transactions in your app. They don't get that in your browser. In the browser, you get all the money as the app developer. All the money that exchanges between the app and the user is 100% goes directly from the user to the app maker in the browser. In the App Store, if you build an app, then next thing you know, Apple's got their hand out saying, we want 30% of all the transactions of money through these apps.
Oh, they also go as far as we could do is within the app, you could create a web interface. So you can say you're in the app, but you're still using the web process payments. They will come in and mess with you for doing that. They'll say, no, they don't want you to do that. So even though it's like, wait, we're not using your stuff, but if you're going, their number one thing that they look at is a web browser usage. I remember in one of my apps we had, they're like, why are you using web version? Just use the app. We're like, we have FAQs in there, dude. It's just FAQs. And they're like, no, you should put those into the app. And that's what I mean. They want to. They're so controlling, and you don't know who you're going to get, and you get stuck for a long time. And every time you do an update, you're nervous. You're like, "Oh my God, is it going to go through? Is it going to go through?" And you don't know.
And you don't know when it's going to go through, and you want to tell your users. Clubhouse all the time is like, the new app should be coming out like Wednesday. It's like, well, you don't know, because there's somebody at Apple who's deciding when to approve your app. Where on the web in the browser, you hit publish, it's live, like within as soon as you hit publish. Anyway, so Google isn't so reliant on the revenue from their app store, so they're totally fine with improving Chrome to run these progressive web apps. So I got off on a tangent. Anyways,
I think one thing worth mentioning, and this was the original vision of the web, apps running within a browser. All the way back to Tim
Steve
Berners-Lee.
Jobs. The whole vision of the iPhone. Steve Jobs had to be convinced that the App Store should be a thing, because he thought everything was going to run in the browsers.
Right, and remember Larry Ellison and the Net PC even before that. I mean, there's a lot of stories.
Oh,
HyperCard
the whole
before that.
Sun Microsoft, the whole vision of which really Sun was kind of the originator of this whole concept was the terminal, as it's called, or the machine. It wouldn't matter which machine it was. You would walk up to any computer in the world and you could have access to all of your stuff, so to speak. That's the idea, was that it's a dumb terminal, anyway.
The argument on the other side, Tyler, is security. So, and it's a valid argument. I mean, what's going to happen when all of the browser is so capable and you no longer have this control mechanism of verifying the binaries? What can be executed on your device now?
So anyway, during this event around Chrome, developers, during a live question and answers with Chrome leadership, there was a question. Given the court proceedings against AMP, why should anyone trust Flock, which is Google's new cookie alternative, or any other Google initiatives ostensibly focused on privacy? The question at the event drew a tepid response from Chrome leadership, who avoided giving a straight answer. They said they could not comment on the AMP-related legal proceedings, but focused on the privacy sandbox.
It's interesting that this is the first time I hear AMP, because AMP, it's really good for SEO stuff, because it's almost like indexing the page, so it doesn't have to constantly refresh it, and so it's designed so you use AMP so that the user could get a faster experience. When you get those nice carousels, when you go to Google, you do a search, you'll see all those nice features, those new visual representations of the data showing up differently. A lot of that is AMP stuff, authors and who wrote it, and recipes and things of that nature. It's designed to go faster, because we've used it. It's actually annoying to have to do it. It adds additional steps, but my understanding is that's really kind of a rapid indexing process that they're trying to do. So I don't understand what the privacy issue is there.
It goes beyond that, man, because a lot of articles actually, when you compile it to an AMP version of your application, it's actually hosted under Google as well. So, for instance, TechCrunch, a lot of their articles, if you go to Google and then you find a TechCrunch result and then you go through to the site, the URL is no longer TechCrunch anymore. The URL is actually the AMP URL. And then they have a subcategory under that, TechCrunch, where all these cached articles are. So it really moves a hell of a lot more power, not just from, Google already had the search engine power. Now it's actually the content hosting is coming under their bracket with that. But yeah, it's incredibly fast. Your load time can go from like 20 seconds for a site down to less than a second. So it's insanely fast. But as Tyler was saying, that it prioritizes the companies that are willing to offload their content onto Google and allow Google not only to index it, but to actually host it and serve it under their name and branding as well.
But let me ask you this: is it a priority thing, or is it because they have it on their servers, and so they could cache it and it could run faster versus loading up data on other people's servers, right? I get the point. I get the point is, if they're going to cache the whole thing, and eventually it's like, that's what everybody's going to do, because it's going to go faster. But they're really caching the whole internet, all the pages. But from a technical perspective, I don't know that they're doing that on purpose. I don't think they're doing it on purpose. How else could you run if you're pitching something from your servers and you're running it from right there from your servers that you cache versus having to go tap somebody else's server? That's just always going to be faster, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the accusation is. I can't see the article isn't pinned at the top, and I'm not in a position to read the article.
I've got it right here. The strong point here is they're saying, because Google's encouraging people to use AMP, and Google's telling them, it'll make things go faster. Of course, Google has a financial interest in this, but the big revelation is that Google is throttling the load times of non-AMP ads by giving them an artificial 1-second delay in order to give Google AMP a nice comparative boost. So you get a false performance benefit because they're intentionally sandbagging or delaying the loading times if you're not using Google AMP.
It's just moving from one
That's the question.
centralized.
The big question is where's the proof that they're throttling is a big deal. Like, are they throttling, or is this an assumption that they're doing it? And are they saying it's throttled because they detect that it's a second slower, or are they purposefully, like when they say purposefully doing it, like they programmed in a second delay versus it's just going to be a second delay because you have to, it's not on your servers, it's on other people's servers you're pitching up. So that's they're saying it's on purpose. Where's that? Like, how do they prove it's on purpose?
It says the AMP allegations in recently unredacted antitrust complaint against Google was extremely unlikely to receive an adequate response from Chrome leadership, but the mere act of asking is a public reminder of the trust Google was willfully eroded in pushing AMP on publishers. When Google received a demand for a trove of documents from the Department of Justice as part of the pre-trial process, Google was reluctant to hand them over. These documents reveal how Google identified and basically did this. The complaint alleges that Google ad server employees met with AMP employees to strategize about using AMP to impede header binding, whatever. So there's unredacted legal documents essentially that assert this. In summary, it claimed that Google falsely told publishers that adopting AMP would enhance load times, even though the company's employees knew that it only improved the median of performance and actually loaded slower than some speed optimization techniques publishers had been using. It alleges that AMP pages brought 40% less revenue to the publishers. The complaint states that AMP's speed benefits were also at least parity, partly a result of Google's throttling. Google throttles the load time of non-AMP ads by giving them artificial 1-second delays in order to give Google AMP a seeming advantage.
I think we need to move away from a centralized system. I mean, whether it's apps or this Google-controlled system, and away from an advertising system for that matter. Are there any thoughts here in this group on the Web3 and the distributed potential of something like IPFS, Interplanetary File System?
Well, yeah, but just for the non-geeks in the room, AMP is accelerated mobile pages. It's an open source HTML framework developed by AMP open source project, originally created by Google as a competitor to Facebook. AMP is optimized for mobile web browsing and intended to help web pages load faster. And they're pushing it on people, and if you get a performance boost, and Google can start playing tricky games, and this is if strong evidence is brought on this could get Google in a lot of trouble because they're manipulating the web essentially to their own benefit. Okay, that one's a bit geeky, but it's an important one. Unfortunately, like the regulators, Washington, D.C. will have no ability to even understand what's happening there, so I don't know that anything's ever going to come of it. But
just quickly, Tyler, just to finalize that, and when we were talking about PWAs before, people have got to stop thinking of Chrome as a browser. Chrome is not intended to be a browser. The engine is not intended to be a browser from Google. It hasn't been for a very long time. It's an operating system. If you want to use, do Excel sheets and spreadsheets and stuff, you use Google Sheets. You've got the docs, you've got the drive. You've even got levels of video editing now being introduced. And then you've got the PWAs and the extensions and everything. The point of it is to have this sort of agnostic, device agnostic operating system, and that's how you have to think of this when you're reading articles like this, because then it puts it in the correct light, because what they really want is control over the process of what everyday people are doing on their devices through their applications and their services and their cachings and everything else. So it's really meant to replace all the built-in functionality of your phone. That's where they've been going with this for a very long while.
Okay, next up is a look at digital pets site Neopets, which had 25 million users back in the 2000s. Its owner, Jumpstart Games, says 30 to 40% of former users returned since March 2020. So the return of Neopets, potentially.
Jesus, that's a nostalgic flashback.
Yeah. And BotKeeper, which provides AI-powered bookkeeping automation software, raises $42 million. NeuroID, whose real-time behavioral analytics tool helps companies reduce fraud and customer friction, raises $35 million. I imagine they're using some very crafty shit to reduce fraud and customer friction. If the name of the company's NeuroID uses real-time behavioral analytics, that's some clever shit.
We talked about that the other day, Tyler, and it's tracking. It's everything that all the big companies are doing on their own platforms.
Yeah.
For instance, tracking your mouse, how long you're hovering over a certain picture, your hesitancy, that kind of thing. And they had a lovely list of inferences on their site that you can use. If you remember when we were talking about the VR, the things you can learn by VR, it was kind of a list like that where it was just going through all the inferences that their platform apparently provides. But it's their integrations that we found really surprising. Yeah, like the companies that they're working with.
They're working with a bunch of big fintechs, Intuit, Square, Affirm, which is the Klarna of the US, and Elephant Insurance are using NeuroID, proprietary human analytics software that translates all of the swipes and taps of user behavior into actionable insights. The behavioral analytics also enables customers to see and use behavioral data to optimize existing AI and machine learning models. Customers on average have been able to increase conversion by 200% and reduce historical fraud rates by 35%. It's very clever shit. For example, insurance companies in China, which is called Ping An, which is one of the biggest companies in China, and a Swede happens to be a kind of deputy CEO of the company, spoke at my event in Hong Kong, it's like the tallest building in all of Shenzhen is the Ping An Tower. It's kind of like the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, although much bigger. And he explained to me what they do is and this is going to become incredibly common. I don't see why it wouldn't, but it's crazy what they do. So it's an online insurance company. And so if you want to, you don't need to go to an office and sign documents. You just open your web browser. You can even do it on your phone. And then they start asking you questions, right? Okay, you want to buy an insurance policy for your apartment or your car or whatever. And then they start asking you these questions that are based on a video. They want you to answer the questions like in a video call, like a FaceTime call. And they are reading your face, and they are intentionally asking you questions that they know you have to lie about, because psychologists and cognitive scientists know that when people are untruthful, they do characteristic facial mannerisms, like they look in a particular direction or they have little mannerisms, and they intentionally want to have you reveal what your mannerisms are when you're being untruthful. And they catalog this stuff, and they know your mannerisms when you're being truthful. And the AIs and the machine learning algorithms can do this better than any human can. Detect impartial inaccuracies or impartial truths, and the knowledge of when you are telling the truth. These algorithms can detect this stuff in ways that humans can't, just like they can detect songs through Shazam. So then if you do come back and you say, something happened to my car, and they'll say, great, well, tell us about it. What happened? They will know if you're telling the truth or not to a much higher degree than any human ever could. So the next one is a company called Abound, an online wholesaler marketplace connecting retailers and brands, raises $36 million. And records show that the U.S. Treasury bought this is crazy, y'all. If this is true, this is crazy. Records show that the U.S. Treasury bought location and other app data from controversial sellers called like Babel Street in recent months to hunt for tax and sanctions dodgers. So the same kind of dark web kind of databases that hackers use. Now the U.S. Treasury is using to hunt down people because they've got that. Here's the crazy game that we're in 2021. Is Apple's telling you that your privacy is secure on your phone, and Google's telling you, oh, we don't take your personal data. We're taking groups of user data based on cohorts. A cohort means a group of people. Well, it turns out that you can take some of the data that's given by the devices and the sites and go to these third-party sources like Babel Street and show them whatever information you do have, and then they'll help you identify who that person is. They'll de-anonymize the data for you. And this exists, and this is very well known to exist. So it's just a silly little game of this 1 degree of separation so that the original company, Apple or Google, can have plausible deniability. Nope, we didn't give away your information. Not at all. Nope. And they know goddamn well that the information they're giving is look-upable, into, kind of like looking up a directory or a phone book. It's like, oh, we've got this data point from an iPhone. Here's 100,000 users. Who are these people? And you can look them up on these third-party sources. And the idea that the Treasury Department is buying private app data to target and investigate people. The department will use controversial firms to hunt for tax and sanctions dodgers, raising constitutional concerns. The Treasury Department has in recent months expanded its digital surveillance powers. Contracts provided to The Intercept reveal, turning to the controversial firm Babel Street, which critics say it helps federal investigators buy their way around the Fourth Amendment. 2 contracts obtained via the Freedom of Information Act request and shared with The Intercept, a research show that over the past 4 months, the Treasury Department acquired 2 powerful new data feeds from Babel Street, one for its sanctions enforcement branch and one for the IRS, which is the tax agency. Both feeds enable government use of sensitive data collected by private corporations not subject to due process restrictions. Critics were particularly alarmed that the Treasury acquired access to location and other data harvested from smartphone apps. Users are often unaware of how widely apps share such information. The first contract, dated July 15 at a cost of $154,000, is with Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, a quasi-intelligence wing responsible for enforcing economic sanctions against foreign regimes like Iran, Cuba, and Russia. A June report from NYU Law School Brennan Center for Justice found that the vast enforcement powers require greater oversight from Congress. The report criticized a lack of legal limits and pointing out that the group includes American citizens within U.S. borders and foreigners without any government ties. According to, what was the second one? About from the IRS. Babel Street has claimed its location data is anonymized. Yeah, right. Sure it is. And so there was another source, Motherboard, says that we can absolutely de-anonymize a person and play with it to be, it's plausible deniability is what it all comes down to. Anyway,
the thing is,
Pretty scary.
Morning, Tyler. The thing is here that there is quite a few tricks up the sleeve to actually do these things, and I'm actually surprised that the government has not been started doing this before, because this is very, very open data, and the modus operandi is quite open as well. This is the tools and the tricks I use to track down scammers and fraudsters, and it's actually not that hard. If someone wants to do a really, really deep rabbit hole dive, we can start up a room regarding this sometime.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, the thing is here that there is something called open source intelligence. If you search up OSINT, OSINT handbook, you will have a rabbit hole in the size of a small the Minotaur labyrinth to dive through.
Okay. Next one is, what do we got? Bird did their IPO, the little mobility scooter company. Gather, which builds metaverse-like environments for offices, events, and conferences, raises $50 million. And Apple hires CJ Moore, Tesla's autopilot software director, who in January told the DMV that Elon Musk's full self-driving claims didn't match engineering reality. Apple says it has identified and fixed a firmware issue with its, which was bricking some Macs laptops while upgrading to Mac OS Monterey. Thank God for that. Twitter commentary erupts after Microsoft Ignite speakers described their physical appearances and race and noted the Microsoft campus was built on native lands. That was a very funny video.
It was so cringy.
And that is your big boring stories today. Now we get into the tweets, as we always do. Just a quick refresh. Yep, we're done with the big boring ones. So the tweets are like this one from Sue Domini, that the FBI issues public warning about increasing crypto scams in the U.S. The FBI says scammers target victims by pretending to be government officials, potential romantic partners, and even lottery masters. So it's a bit of a stupidity tax there. Hopefully you don't get hit there. The next one is a big one. This is a huge story. BB sends in this one from Nikkei, Japan. New China data transfer rules to be costly for foreign companies. Business groups worry about vague terms in draft regulations. This is huge. This is why Yahoo just left China after sitting there dormant for 20 years, not really doing much, because of these the China, personal data laws, which is kind of like the GDPR in Europe. China has passed this their version of GDPR. And basically non-Chinese companies are like, oh, we're out. We are not going to stick around and wait to see what the CCP decides to, how they decide to penalize us. So they're jumping out. Yahoo jumped out. LinkedIn jumped out. There will be pretty much anybody. There's going to be a whole lot of very big companies jumping out in the very near future. Because it's China's going to force, if you're doing anything with data in China, and you're not a Chinese company, that's going to be a really interesting, difficult river to swim across. Proposed rules to tighten control on the transfer of data from China are likely to raise costs significantly for foreign companies operating in the country, lawyers say. Yep. That's putting it mildly.
I think because they always leave a loophole in the laws, because it's any important data overseas, you need to to conduct a security review. But what is important is not defined. So anytime it can be just like Jack Ma. If it's just, the government said, hey, you broke law, then you broke law.
Yeah, Personal Data Protection Law, it's called. PIPL. And yeah, I found a really interesting site that I'll tweet out that compares this to GDPR, so you can kind of see a side-by-side comparison in a graph as, what is included and what's not included in each. And it has every non-Chinese company who does anything with data in China very rightfully concerned. Okay, So the next article is from Pseudomini that Jeff Bezos offered Tom Hanks a seat on Blue Origin's spaceflight. Okay, simple as that. The next one is Amazon's self-driving Zoox taxis, spelled Zoox, are training for rain in Seattle. And this vehicle is the classic vehicle we've seen countless times. First in Stockholm, Sweden 4 years ago, in Kista near Ericsson HQ. And this same form factor just will not die. It goes everywhere around the planet. We've seen it in many, many countries. This cute little autonomous minibus where you can stand upright and you can pack about 15 people in there and it will drive around anyway. So the tricky part is how to make it operate, in tougher climates. And the article I just tweeted out is about how it's happening in how Amazon's getting into the game. And next one is from BBC, and it talks about romance fraud. I wish I didn't give $300,000 to a man I met online. One woman tells BBC her experience of being a victim of romance fraud. And this is becoming a bit of a hot issue where you get these lonely folks, ostensibly, who, think they're falling in love with people online who then ask for money and then they give it away. And it's happening to both of demographics of all kinds.
Yeah, this is something that has actually accelerated during the pandemic. We regarding the number of reports and actual reports to the police. The thing is here that the only country that really have a good way of reporting this is the UK, and they have seen a significant amount of more romance scams, and we talk about 170% acceleration during the pandemic. And this is based on data from 2018, 2019, 2020 so far, and 2021 doesn't look so good either. The thing is here that, as you say, this is focused on all genders, the whole scale, not only us male and females, also all the other ones that actually have more trouble to find have been victimized in a new way during this wave of new scams coming. And actually this is one of the first things that hit me from my professional side here on Clubhouse was a romance scammer. And we did get him blocked, but he is back again. Now he was actually scamming elderly women in Sweden on Clubhouse. And then you can say, how come they ended up here? They were invited by him here. Johan done.
Okay. And Pseudomini sends in this one that WhatsApp could be working on a new community feature. WhatsApp is speculated to be working on new communities feature that will give group admins more power over groups. That's very cool. And Forbes has an article on the future of delivery robots. And they say just a few years ago, the stuff was pure science fiction, and now they're very much a reality and quickly becoming a part of everyday life. And in the photo, they show the Estonian robot delivery company that everyone else is copying, including Amazon. And they very much are happening. And Yandex, the Russian search engine, is also completely copied this format and they're doing it even in the US at universities. And a lot of these little robot delivery companies are focusing for some reason on American universities as their kind of beta testing. And Poppy found a headline that a water-absorbing material inspired by plant roots could power robots. soft robots could one day be powered by material that absorbs water to become strong and stiff, mimicking the physics of cells in plants. And Microsoft says it will end OneDrive updates to Windows 7 and 8. And Wired has an article. The headline says, LiDAR, which is used in autonomous cars, for example, LiDAR uncovers hundreds of lost Maya and Olmec ruins. An aerial survey in southern Mexico discovered a host of ceremonial sites that could date as far back as 1000 BC. And this is super cool. It was used a few months ago in Cambodia, where they were trying to figure out why did the Khmer Empire collapse, where you have the old Khmer ruins there, which are kind of the, the architectural highlight of Southeast Asia, is this amazing empire that clearly existed there. And they used LiDAR there through airplanes, and they figured out that much of the area around the architectural ruins or remains were large pools of water, and that the water system collapsed, and hence killing the civilization, which was ostensibly one of the largest civilizations on the planet at the time, if not the largest. And when the water supply got disrupted, next thing you know, you've got catastrophic civilization collapse. And if for anyone who studies civilization collapse, it turns out that water supply is usually the cause. So when I talk about droughts and water scarcity and climate refugees due to water, pay very close attention, because there's a very long, rich history of civilizations collapsing due to lack of water. Sudden changes in water.
Tyler, you're not saying that water is important again, are you?
It's this weird idea that I have, that humans can't go more than 3 days without it. It's just a weird idea. And that we're dependent on it being trucked in on trucks into many urban environments who no longer have clean drinking water and are dependent on water from outside being trucked in. So they are, putting their life in other people's hands in a way that they don't really need to do. You can go buy a water atmospheric generator and generate your own drinkable clean water in your own house. Anywho, the next one is also from Wired. The headline says, "These robots follow you to learn where you go." It's a little robot called Burrow. Burrow makes carts that help growers of trees and vineyards with harvests. And meanwhile, the maker of Vespa scooters also getting into the robot game. And CNN headline says that Wong Yaping becomes the first Chinese woman to complete a spacewalk. Chinese astronaut Wong Yaping made history Sunday when she became the country's first woman to conduct a spacewalk. And Poppy found an interesting article about firefighting robots that I just tweeted out. They look like miniature little tanks with fire hoses. And a 17-year-old invents robots twice as powerful as a firefighter. I guess it's the same article from a different perspective. And then children's book on cybersecurity given to over 200 kids in Singapore. How do you keep a thief out? By locking the door, because doing so means crooks are likely to be trying to break into another. So it's teaching kids cybersecurity, and they appear to be, it shows the kids in the class with the books. They appear to be about 13 years old, and they're teaching them cybersecurity in classrooms in Singapore. And
that's probably a very, very good idea.
I think it is indeed, yeah. Then the next one is BB sends in this one from The Verge that Elon Musk polls his Twitter followers to ask if he should sell 10% of his Tesla stock. And the answer they said was, and he said, whatever you decide I will do. 10% of his Tesla stock is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of, what is it? What is the market cap of Tesla at the moment, and what would 10% of that be?
I think we're talking 30 billion, roughly.
Right, I thought it was 20, but yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. So selling.
I'm wondering why he does this. I didn't quite follow the story, but I mean, usually somebody in his position would always borrow against his assets and never sell.
True.
I think it's a follow up to the COP26 because the hunger.
No, he said it had something to do with the tax of the your gains taxes. I'm sure Ken can jump in.
I'll tell you what it was. Okay, at one point there was a proposal, which has now been dumped, to tax people on the
Unearned gains. Yeah.
Unrealized
gains. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I guess he just took it up and said, well, if everyone thinks I'm not paying enough money in taxes, well, I'll just sell 10% of, which, by the way, I think Tesla's now $1 trillion market cap. So,
right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but I don't remember what percentage, is his holding. So, so he's going to, supposedly he follows through. He'll sell a lot of stock, which, if you're a Tesla shareholder, you really don't want to see happen. But he didn't poll the other Tesla shareholders. He polled people who have Twitter accounts. And by the way, he's a smart guy. He might actually think, hey, maybe the stock ran up too much, and this is a way I could, dump a lot of it. Not dump, dump 10% of it. Get some cash, pay some taxes, and no one's going to be, necessarily suspicious that it's because I think this evaluation problem. It's like I'm doing a public service. I mean, so who knows? I mean, that's he says a lot of things. We'll see if he follows through.
So I think he has around 250 million shares. Not all of them. I don't understand the system completely myself, but I know a huge amount of those are in options that are tied to his performance contract. Those options happen to expire at the end of December this year, I believe. So I don't know if that adds extra context to this, Ken. I don't know if that's additional motivation why he would go to sell off 10% of that.
Yes, I'll tell you the tax reason behind that. So typically, if you if your options are going to expire, that means he needs to exercise them or lose
exactly.
Them. And if he's going to exercise them, the way the tax law works in the United States is that it really becomes a taxable event, whether you sell the shares or not. So, and I'll just make up a number. So I forgot what Tesla stock is trading. Could someone can remind me? It's, I don't know.
Slightly over a K last time I looked, but it's pretty volatile.
K, right? Okay. So let's say his option is like at 300. I mean, if they're recent options, it can be lower. His options, let's say $200. He has to pay tax on the difference between 200 and 1,000. Okay, when he exercises, whether he actually sells the stock or not. So now all of a sudden he's got to pay tax on $800 per share, and he has to pay it in cash. So a lot of people do what's called a simultaneous exercise and sale. Okay, so if he was planning on doing that anyway, he gets the dump 10%, and he makes it look like it's because the Twitter people said to do it, but he might have wanted to do it anyway, just not to have end up having to pay a lot of taxes where he doesn't have the cash. I mean, it doesn't. You're. I mean, it's you see what I'm saying? You could have a cash crunch, exercising options that are way in the money. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
That's a good point actually, because he doesn't, if I understand it correctly, he doesn't actually take any kind of wage. And somebody was saying earlier that you normally take out debt and leverage it against what you have in unrealized assets. Like he does, I think it's like 500 million in debt, which is a tiny amount considering what he's potentially worth if he was to actually liquidate some of the assets. But yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah, he's just borrowing against his assets, as all these people do. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and
that's different.
How would he pay the tax If he was having to pay tax on, if he was to sort of realise some of these options, actually take the options, and then he had to pay that 80% that you were saying there, Ken, how would he actually pay that if he doesn't actually have any...
Well,
Hello?
I can try to answer it. I think he would do one of two things. As Ken suggested, he could sell off, and maybe it does sound like a very good thesis that he would sell off to pay for these options. I think he has 200 million, if I'm not mistaken, in options on Tesla in addition to his shares. Or he could borrow against it and generate cash that way.
Okay. Next up. The article from ZDNet from Lewis in the audience says, Microsoft will now snitch on you at work like never before. You think there are limits to what your employer can see and do online? Some new Microsoft updates may make you think a little more about what your employer can see if you're working remotely as such. And the next one is the Iraqi prime minister says he was the target of a drone assassination attempt. Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi said he was the target of a failed assassination attempt using drones. Told you.
I just quickly on this, Tyler, because we had a thing earlier about drones. I apologise for the background noise. I don't really know where this is going to go. I don't know what the solution to this is, because even if you completely ban drone sales and manufacturing, I can and have made one with my 3D printers. So this, if you can build these things at home really, really, really easily, I don't know how the regulation is going to work, and you can't fit anti-drone devices at every single governmental and infrastructural building around the world. So I'm really interested in where this is going to go, where this is going to finish.
That is a perfect encapsulation of where things are headed, because just like the drones are a threat physically, the genetic engineering is a threat, biologically, just like the crypto is a threat economically, just like on every front, tech is putting very powerful tools in the hands of people that governments can do nothing about, all simultaneously on every front. And the agencies that are responsible for these activities, like the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, was never designed 100 years ago to deal with a reality where everyone can print their own flying devices in their bedrooms.
But don't you think? Isn't it pretty amazing that there's like billions of people on the earth, and you have all these technologies out there, and that you have? It's actually pretty rare, right? Like only, that attack that we were talking about. Somebody did some copper coil thing on a power deal, and then this prime minister in pretty, bad place, Iraq. They have a lot of
That's
issues.
the scary thing, though, dude. We're not even there yet. Like we're still
just starting.
These are the beginning fucking playoffs. There's,
yes, we're not even in the World Series yet. This is the rehearsal. It's going to get 10 times worse in the next 10 years.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more incidents, but I mean, it's still, I guess I'm just saying that the positive side of that, given the amount of human beings that have the ability to go purchase a drone and do nefarious things, right? The amount that are doing it, statistically speaking, relative, to how many of it's very low, right? So that's maybe a positive sign, I think.
Is this the beginning of the self-destruction of humanity?
Well, that's why I have moved to Thailand. But I think the genetic engineering one is even more scarier than the drone one, because you're going to have people doing genetic engineering that shouldn't be, and they're going to do just as the computer engineers made computer viruses. You're going to have bad actors making actual viruses, and that one really scares me. So,
have you heard of the gene drive? That, like in New Zealand when they were trying to get rid of the rats, right? But now they can go in and target genes and actually make people. They can make people unproductive, and then also pass those genes down to make or make creatures unproductive, and then make their offspring not have produce children as well. And so there's using CRISPR technologies, they're now getting down into what's called a gene drive. That's like basically going down to the offspring levels too, where they're engineering it to pass it on. That is a pretty scary thing.
So the this guy, the prime minister in Iraq, says he survived the drone assassination attempt on November 7 at his home in Baghdad's highly secure green zone. The country's interior ministry said the attack involved 3 drones, including at least 1 bomb-laden drone. 6 bodyguards were injured during the incident, and an official talking to Reuters claimed security forces obtained the remnants of a small drone at the scene. And they can't identify the culprits.
By the way, speaking of drones, I see right now as I'm driving every few miles, no drone zone, right? And literally just military everywhere. It's actually pretty wild, man. It's like the most beautiful place on earth, one of the most beautiful places, and half the vehicles are military trucks with dudes sticking out with guns everywhere up here in Kashmir. But there's basically signs everywhere, no drone zones all over the place.
So the next one is from Poppy, from The Guardian. It says, the dawn of tapigraphy. Does your smartphone know how you feel before you do? Tech companies are seeking to analyze data on the way we tap, scroll, text, and call to monitor our mental health. Exactly right. And this highlights, again, another innovation that gives incredible power that we cannot manage. We're opening Pandora boxes all over the place that we can't even begin to calculate where this will lead. Tech companies are seeking to analyze data on the way we tap, scroll, text, and call to monitor our mental health with potential consequences for privacy and healthcare. We all fear our smartphones spy on us, and I'm subject to a new type of surveillance, an app called Tap Counter. Records each time I touch my phone's screen. My swipes and jabs are averaging about 1,000 a day, though I noticed that's falling as I steer shy of social media to meet my deadline. The European company behind it, called Quant Actions, promises that through capturing and analyzing the data, it will be able to detect important indicators related to mental and neurological health. The company's co-founder and a neuroscientist at a university in Netherlands says tapigraphy patterns, the time series of my touches, can, he says, confidently be used not only to infer slumber habits, but also mental performance levels, and he published work supporting it. And so they can measure your reaction times, and they can see how it compares to days when you have enough sleep and when you don't, and they know how tired you are. They can see this micro difference in your usage and infer all kinds of interesting points. They plan to launch features based on those insights next year, but further into the future, they would like to use the technology for medical reasons, including to predict seizures in people with epilepsy. This year, they published a small clinical study of people with epilepsy that shows how subtle changes in smartphone tapigraphy alone could be used to infer abnormalities in their brainwaves. Our hope is that someday we can forecast upcoming episodes. Yeah, well, it always starts with very positive use cases, and this is the blind spot of every well-meaning innovator. Is here's this cool new thing we can do, and here's all of the positive use cases for it, and let's build it. And they build it, and they build it, and they build it, and they build a fighter plane or a machine gun, And then the next thing they know is other people have other ideas for how to use that thing you just built.
And it's not always accidental, right, Tyler? Like it's very likely that this is a company that's had a good idea for gathering this biometric data, and they want to build this ML product, this ML model, but they want to sell it to someone as a service, as like an API service. But they need the data first. So you repackage it and rebrand it for the average consumer. Hey, it can help you do this, it can help you monitor that. And then they get all the data, it refines the ML product, and then boom, they've got something that can sell to integrate into other platforms.
I just tweeted that one out. That one's, worth thinking about. But the next one from Ken, you had this one from MSN. Their headline says, Facebook's own researchers found that Facebook is bad for... Ooh, we have a chance to play our favorite show. Let's do this. Wake up, everybody. It's our chance to play our favorite show, Tech News Jeopardy. According to MSN's headline, Facebook's own research found that Facebook is bad for how many millions of users? Facebook's internal research found compulsive use hurts sleep and work relationships or parenting for what percent of users? Let's do that. What percent of users are harmfully affected by sleep and work relationships?
100.
5%.
No, we didn't want the truth, Aaron.
83%.
360 million.
20 million.
What percent? Percent.
Yeah.
4. 83.
Facebook would probably say less than 1%.
Anybody? Nobody was that close. The answer was 12.5%, which is 360 million users.
That's actually more than I thought they'd admit to.
And Poppy found this one. Why business owners are turning to gratitude robots to show their appreciation. Some companies are using robots to write gratitude letters for their hardworking staff, as it allows them to save time and scale their outreach. And they're writing handwritten letters with robots. So I just tweeted this. You have to see this cute little robot writing handwritten thank you letters.
It really is just a boring dystopia that we're in now, isn't it? The end of the world is here, and it's crap and boring.
It's fantastic.
Preserving some, handwriting art. Otherwise, in the future, people won't write with their hands.
Not interesting unless they're handwriting bonus checks for those employees and sending flowers while they're at it.
But the problem is if it can, because in American you sign for your papers, for the check. Here we have those stamps. So if it can, imitate the signatures, so that will be a problem.
Okay. Well, we're going to pause it there, and we're going to meet again in, let's see, we're at 10 for about 6 hours. And we're going to meet for about 2 hours, and then we're going to have a actual physical live event from Stockholm. With
Tyler, question: is it 5 hours or 6 hours? 4 hours later?
From now, 6 hours from now.
Yeah, we changed our clocks in the US.
So the clock has changed.
In America, it changed yesterday.
Yeah, the daylight.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so it's okay. It's okay.
6 hours.
1 hour later. Okay.
So 6 hours from now, we start Tech News Around the World, as we always do in this room. I will be very busy, so I'm going to, Cheryl, if you and Cammie and others can, and if everyone can bring their favorite headlines to share for that one, because I'm going to be preparing for my live event, which will do the room for 2 hours, and then it will start a live event with actual live speakers on an actual physical stage with about 400 physical people in a physical auditorium that can join us And then we have the social audio hybrid, so that people in the audience, I can invite some on stage to ask questions of the actual physical people on stage, and they'll actually hear you because they'll be wearing ear pods on stage.
Okay. Is it on Twitter Space or Clubhouse for the event?
I haven't decided yet.
Okay, let us know.
Tyler, you haven't. By the way, you haven't scheduled anything in a couple hours for Clubhouse yet. I don't think.
Oh, you're right.
Okay.
Let me schedule it right now. So the first 2 hours will be in Clubhouse as normal. The physical part of the event, I need to test which works better for that use case for Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces. So we'll meet here for 2 hours for sure, and then we'll either stay here and the speakers will join on stage, or we'll need to jump into a Twitter Space. We'll figure that out in the next 6 hours. So thank you.
Big day for you today, Tyler. Really, really cheering you on, man. You're going to do really well.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we've been doing them every month for a decade, so I have no doubt about that.
More the culmination of like so many months of talking about the hybrid event. I think it's pretty cool that you're actually getting to do it, man.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, Tyler. So how are you doing in the climate crisis now? It must be a 27 degrees difference in between waking up in Sweden and Thailand.
Indeed, it is. We just had the first little snow come down about an hour ago. I don't know if you noticed that, Johan.
I know that.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
Did you feedback about the Wi-Fi speed yet to Johan?
What?
The broadband Wi-Fi speed. You say that it's slower than Thailand.
Oh yeah. Just the Tele2's strength. Thailand's covered in 5G. You walk around Thailand, as Lakeisha will tell you, and you're getting like 100, 200, 300 megabyte per second download on your phones. You're not getting that in Sweden just yet, so it's quite far behind.
Seriously, you shouldn't go for Tele2 or Telenor in Stockholm. You should go for Telia. They will have 5G. So get yourself a decent SIM card, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We will meet again in 6 hours.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler. Bye, everybody.